Hello, everybody, and welcome into our last playoff preview show here at the Hockey Writers for the first round, that is. And we've got the Kings and the Oilers left here on the docket, and I've got Jacob Strozyk and Jacob Billington here with me again. Jacob is going to be taking on the Edmonton Oilers, and the other Jacob Billington, is going to be taking on the Los Angeles Kings. So welcome, guys. Thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
And the two Jacobs. You got to put your last names in there too. Uh, all right. Well, this is a rematch of the third time in a row. I'm sure Oilers fans are and Kings fans too, are probably getting annoyed of this matchup and want to have another team in the first round. But this is it. We've got the first round with these two teams again. I'll start with you, Jacob, and just talking about the Kings season. I mean, they started off so well. I had such a great streak going, fell into a bit of a rut, fired their head coach, and now have an interim coach now. And then made the playoffs, but was up and down throughout the seasons. It was a bit of a roller coaster for Kings fans. Playing that 1-3-1 style and seemed to be successful in it. What do you think about the Kings season and how they played against the Oilers throughout?
Yeah, I think they have the system down, the 1-3-1. It works well with this group. And we've seen, I mean, even Drew Doughty said, like, it's no fun, but it works. And I think it all boils down to this team lives and dies on their goaltending. They have a ton of talent all through their lineup, and they don't have the best goalies, but Cam Talbot had a fantastic start to the season. Phoenix Copley is hurt now. So it's now Cam Talbot and Dave Rittich, I believe. So, yeah, it's the series is going to live or die on them. They almost didn't make the playoffs. It didn't look good for a little while, but they made it. They kind of picked things back up at the tail end of the season. They have some good depth scoring all through the lineup. They have like their fourth line right now. I believe for game one, it'll probably have Pierre-Luc Dubois and Quentin Byfield on it. That's insanely deep. But they just have it all through their lineup.
Yeah, I mean the Kings they do have depth. They don't play the most exciting style of hockey. Playing against the Canucks, it seems like they had problems with it. A lot of teams that like to play with speed through the neutral zone always have issues with that type of system. But it works for them. And Drew Doughty's, he's like, well, we frustrate teams. That's great. I mean, it's like, okay, well, that's how you do in the playoffs. But the Oilers have gotten through that the last two times. They've kicked them from the playoffs, been able to figure it out. Lots of close games though throughout those series. So probably be another one like that. And over to you, Jacob, talking about the Oilers. I mean, again, this is a team that went the other way. At the beginning of the season, they were horrible. Got into such a big hole that everyone thought, wow, there's no way they're going to make it out of this. And they fired their head coach as well, changed coaches, and now have Chris Knobloch behind the bench, firing Jay Woodcroft, and also sent down Jack Campbell to the minors, who was supposed to be their starter this season. And now Stuart Skinner, had, again, rough start, but turned it around. And now they've been one of the best teams in the league throughout, probably since the head coaching change. Connor McDavid back to his old self. What do you think about their season so overall and going into this playoffs here?
Yeah, that it was a rocky start to the season for sure. And I don't think anybody really expected Edmonton to come that slow out of the gate in any way, shape, or form, because they were really firing on all cylinders the prior season and even going into the playoffs. So with the firepower they have up front and with what people were expecting out of the goaltending, everything just kind of flopped on its face to start. But after the coaching change, and we can even say the goaltending shift, because they also brought up Pickard, who has been solid as a backup to Skinner. And Skinner had that massive run in the middle of the season as well, where he kind of picked his numbers up and was really looking like a great number one goalie. So, despite all of the up and down kind of movement that they were doing throughout the year, I think they finished strong. I think they had a lot of big players step up and regain their confidence, regain who they were, and some other players that you probably wouldn't have expected to produce the way that they did. Most notably, I'd say Zach Hyman. I'm not saying people wouldn't have expected him to score a bunch of goals, but I don't think anybody at the start of the season would have put money down on Zach Hyman being in the top 3 in goal scoring, let alone putting up 50 goals. So players like that make a difference, and it makes even more of a difference in the playoffs.
Mhm. Lots of high-powered offense the Oilers have, and I mean up at that high level, they've got Draisaitl, McDavid, all those big names that you always know they're going to step up. You know what they're going to do. So I'll move to the players to watch, and I mean a lot of these. Obviously, when we're watching those guys, Zach Hyman, great season. Who else are you watching on their team? I mean, apart from those superstars.
Well, I'll say Evan Bouchard, even though he is considered one of the stars now, is definitely a player to watch. The breakout that he had this season was just absolutely astronomical. 82 points in 81 games, 18 goals. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But on top of that, another player I think is a little bit more under the radar that people would want to watch, that kind of picked up his play towards the end of the year offensively, I'd say, is Matthias Ekholm.
Mhm.
Outstanding defensively, and he was putting up good numbers offensively as well. Finished with 11 goals and 45 points, but he was also a plus 44. So his possession game is great. His defensive numbers are looking great. And if I'm looking at this correctly, he also led the Oilers in plus minus two. So maybe a little bit sneakier as far as somebody to watch. And I think he's going to be a good difference maker overall for them, considering the goaltending situation.
Yeah, and that's gonna be something to watch is their goaltending, is how Stuart Skinner will play in the playoffs. He was okay last year, and overall we know the Oilers are going to score goals. And I still say the defense and the goaltending are still question marks, even though they thought that it's kind of fixed. I don't know if it is. We'll see. Jacob, what do you think about the Kings? I mean, they're not the most high-powered offensive team, but they got guys that can score goals. Adrian Kempe came back. He looks back to his old self lately. He's been scoring quite a bit. Pierre-Luc Dubois obviously didn't. He's, like you said, is on the fourth line. He hasn't been very good since he got traded here from the Jets. Who are you watching on the Kings going in here?
I mean, there's so many players to keep an eye on just because they're so balanced and they're so deep, like I mentioned. Drew Doughty, he had one of his best seasons that he's ever had. Maybe not offensively, he didn't have like a career high in points, but like looking at his analytics, he had one of his best seasons. So he's going to be a huge factor in this series. But some underrated guys like Trevor Moore, he had a fantastic season with 57 points. Kevin Fiala, people know that name a little bit more. He's not well, I would say he's an underrated player, but he's not somebody that's gonna stand out from a bottom six grinder kind of guy. But they need their guys that are good defensively to commit to that. They can't cheat. So like Anze Kopitar, Phil Deneau, and then you look at the back end with Vladislav Gavrikov, Matt Roy, Mikey Anderson. Like they have so many great defensive players, and they just need to stick to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what their biggest thing is, just to play more of a defensive style, because if you get into a track meet against the Oilers, you're gonna lose. I mean, that's unfortunate. You're gonna lose. They just have too many weapons. For the Oilers, Jacob, it's like they do, like I say, they do score goals. It's just the fact of keeping them out of their net. And what is their key to victory in this series? I mean, obviously, if the Kings get into penalty trouble, they're going to probably take advantage because their power play is still one of the best. What do they need to do to get through the Kings again for the fourth straight year?
Yeah, it really is.
Third.
Yeah, it really is as simple as you have to break through their defensive scheme more than anything, and actually not contribute, actually score when they do get power play opportunities. Because the way the Kings have played defensively has been very good, but their goaltending isn't exactly a super strong point that I think that they can definitely take advantage of something like that. So actually using their power play prowess to actually do something and continue scoring goals as much as they can. Because on their own end, yeah, they have some good defensive options, but at the end of the day, you're still relying on a second-year goaltender and a career backup as well. So there's not much to help them on the back end comparatively to the Kings. So they're going to have to drive forward with their offense a lot more, and producing on the power play, as well as having as obvious as it might be, having McDavid still produce like Connor McDavid and not disappearing for more than I'd say even a game at a time, that might be too much. But they have to stay consistent and score constantly.
Yeah, and I think, like I say, the last couple seasons, yes, this is a new coach, but they have been playing pretty much the same type of style, and they've been able to get through it. So we'll just see if that happens again. Jacob, is that the same thing with the Kings? Just keep playing that style and hope that it gets that. I mean, it hasn't been successful, so I mean, maybe they have to change things.
I think they have to have a combination of committing to their style, but they also need to rely on their top end guys to get more points. So like they had a couple guys finish in the 70s for points this season, which is fine and dandy. But they need to continue at that rate because they do play that defensive style game. That's in their blood. That's how this team was built. Even like the bottom of the lineup, like Andreas Englund, he played every single game this season. He's a steady, physical number six defenseman. And it's just from top to bottom, starting with Anze Kopitar down to Englund. They do play that physical defensive game. They just need Adrian Kempe, Trevor Moore, Anze Kopitar. They need these guys to keep scoring and do better because all these things are just going to come naturally, except for the points and the production, which you're going to have to outscore Edmonton somehow.
Yeah. I think on the goaltending side, I think they're pretty much the same. I don't think there's a big difference between Cam Talbot and Stuart Skinner, really. I mean, it's not like you're going against Hellebuck and something like that. But I mean, it's weird. I just thought of this, and I don't know why I forgot this, but Cam Talbot used to be an Oiler. I know that quite a bit ago, and so it'll be kind of going against his old team there. So that just got into my head. I don't know why I forgot that, but there you go. All right, X factors. I'll start with the Oilers. What type of X factors you got going into this series for the Oilers here?
Well, the simple answer is scoring ability. So let's talk a little bit about the types of players and the depth that they have in that scoring. Because the obvious ones, like I said, you have McDavid, Draisaitl up front, Hyman, Bouchard. But they've had some solid secondary scoring going down. They have Warren Fogle with 20 goals, Evander Kane with 24 goals, Adam Henrique, who they traded for, also has 24 goals. They have McLeod with 12 goals, and even Corey Perry is sitting at 12 goals. So they have enough scoring going down their lineup that they're not going to have to just rely on those top end players to just do everything for them. There's plenty of opportunities the way that they play to still put the puck in the net, no matter who's on the ice. And even their defensive players have the ability to score. So using all of their weapons, no matter what it is, it doesn't just have to be McDavid, Draisaitl. It can be anybody down the lineup to just keep putting goals in the net. That's going to be the best way for them to make it out of this first round.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, some of their depth guys, Warren Fogle has been really good over the last month or so. You got, Dylan Holloway has come up from the minors, have been lights out lately too. So they do have some depth, a lot more now than they used to, I think. So yeah, I think that's going to be a key, like you said. Jacob, what about you for the Kings for X factors? I mean, there are some guys that are deeper in the lineup, like you said. Quentin Byfield's going to start on the fourth line. That's interesting. We'll see if they can kind of exploit that. Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think, is going to be too. Who do you got as an X factor, or what?
I'm going to go with a what, and I'm going to say be the healthier team. So Edmonton's headed into this with Evander Kane out, at least for game one, and Matthias Janmark is probably going to miss a couple games. Right now, I mean, Carl Grundstrom, I think he's going to be injured to start the series, but LA has so many guys that will rough you up, and Edmonton doesn't really have that, especially with Kane out of the lineup. Like, yes, they have Corey Perry and they have like Darnell Nurse can throw some hits and whatnot, but they don't have like Blake Lizotte and Pierre-Luc Dubois and all of the defensemen that I've mentioned. They're just going to be able to throw way more hits, way harder hits, finish their hits better, and they just need to be the healthier team. They need to come out of this, however long the series is going to go, they need to come out of it with less injuries, because I do think the depth on the LA Kings can match up very well against Edmonton. And when you compare like the bottom six, usually it's the bottom six matching up against the top six just for coverage and whatnot. I really like the makeup of this roster, and I think that they have a good shot to shut down the Oilers.
I mean, I think on the Oilers, maybe Vincent Desharnais is probably the only guy on their back end that's really more of a physical presence. I, I mean, like you mentioned, Evan Bouchard, and the fact that he's gonna be running the offense back there. But uh, Matthias Ekholm has been really good this season too. So it's like I think they can be that. It's just yeah, like you say, I think the Kings have a bit more of that physical, more guys that can do that than the Oilers do. So we'll see how it comes. Is it going to be a track meet or is it going to be more of a physical in the trenches? I think the Kings would be better off in being in the trenches than going back and forth.
100%.
Right. So we'll see what type of game that's played. All right, moving on to bold predictions. I'll start with the Oilers. Jacob, what do you got for a bold prediction in this series?
I don't know what it was, but I put it in my bracket challenge, so I'm going to say it here. The Oilers sweep. That's my bold prediction. Oilers sweep.
All right. What about the Kings, Jacob? What do you got for a bold prediction?
I don't know if this is bold or hopeful, but Pierre-Luc Dubois shows up.
And I think
shows up in a big
that'd
way.
be nice, I bet.
He shows up in a really big way, and I think he plays that really physical game that he can play because he's a very big center. But he also provides some offense and probably works his way up the lineup a little bit because when you have a guy like Phil Deneau on your second line, you can bump him down. Like he's not on your second line for the offense. He's there because he adds a really good balance. But I don't think anybody would be upset if Pierre-Luc Dubois worked his way up to the second line and Phil Deneau was on your fourth line.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Their center depth is really good. And I think that's a big thing about the Kings. And that's when Pierre-Luc Dubois was acquired, I was like, my gosh, they got so much center depth. And unfortunately, Dubois just hasn't produced. And if he can kind of catch fire in the playoffs, I think the Kings have a lot better of a chance of getting through the Oilers, matching up offensively, because we know Dubois can score. I mean, he was on the Jets and he was good there. He was good in Columbus. I mean, I don't know what's happened here. It just doesn't fit the system. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how he does in these playoffs. I think he's going to be for me, he's a big X factor for the Kings. If he can step up and be an impact player, the Kings are a lot better off. All right. Now moving to series predictions of who's going to come out of this. Now, Jacob, you had a bold prediction that the Oilers are going to sweep. Is that your prediction for the actual series, though?
Yeah, I'd say it is. And my logic behind it is it kind of builds off of what I've been talking about is their ability to put pucks in the back of the net. I think it's so high flying. I think they have so much talent up front, and I think they have such a great power play that it's going to balance out everything on their back end or with their goaltending. And I don't think that the Kings are going to be able to keep up with it. I think they're too fast. I think they're too coordinated going up and down the ice, that as long as they don't get caught in that trench match you guys were talking about, I don't see why the Oilers wouldn't just walk all over the Kings at this point with the way that they play. So I'm going to justify the sweep based off of goal scoring alone.
It's a good reasoning. I mean, the thing is like we've said a couple times that the Oilers definitely have a lot more scoring power than the Kings do. Although on paper, there's a few players that you could think the Kings could be able to do that, but I don't think their system allows for that. And that's just what it is. One thing about the Kings, though, is their penalty kill was finished second in the league at the end of the regular season. So they're equipped to kill Oilers power play that, obviously is a really good one. They finished fourth in the NHL. So this is going to be a battle of special teams. I mean, who's going to be able to kill a penalty? Who's going to be able to score on their power play? Because the Kings power play, let's see here, they're 12th. They were 12th so they're a middle of the pack. So I think that's going to be a big key to the series of special teams. What about Jacob? What about you for a prediction? Who's going to win this series?
I think the Oilers are going to win the series. You can convince me that it's going to take 4 games. You can convince me that it's going to take 7. I have no idea. I think it's going to be 7 just because I think the Kings aren't going to go away quietly. But again, like over the whole series, the Kings are going to get outscored like crazy, but they might be able to shut the Oilers down to and win a couple like 2-1 games or 3-1 games with an empty net goal. So
Yeah.
I do think it's going to be a bit of a longer series, but I'm not super confident in that. I do think that it's the Oilers easily.
I agree. I think it's Oilers in, I'm going to say Oilers in 5. I don't like predicting sweeps because they usually don't happen. So, and I
That's
haven't yet.
exactly why I'm saying it.
So I'm going to go that the Kings will squeak one out probably at home because I feel that, well, the Oilers record at home is really good. So they've got home ice. And I think the Oilers get it in 5. All right. Before we go, just a quick, I forgot our series MVP discussion. So just a quick series MVP at the end here. I'll start with the Oilers here.
Oh, I could take the low-hanging fruit and say McDavid, but I feel like that's too simple. So I'll go with maybe a slight dark horse here, and I'm gonna say Nugent-Hopkins. I think he has the potential to contribute well, and he still kind of flies under the radar as one of their better two-way players, and he can still score regardless of where he is in the ice. So I'll give him as a dark horse pick for MVP, even though McDavid is the too easy choice. So I don't want to take the low-hanging fruit.
Well, it looks like he's back healthy. I mean, he was fine.
Yeah.
Seemed like he was fine when he came back. So I don't think he's, like I think it was last playoffs, he was kind of battling injury. Yeah, so I think he's fine. I think he probably will be too. What about for the Kings? Or I mean, I guess for in general.
Well, I mean, in general, it's going to be McDavid. It's super easy. But if the Kings win the series, it's going to have to be Cam Talbot. That's the only option, I think, if the Kings win the series.
For sure. I mean, I think the goaltending is there. He's going to have to be great, I think, for them to win it because they're going to be bombarded with even though they are a good defensive team, it's really tough to shut down lines of Draisaitl and McDavid. They're splitting them up, right? And Hyman has been unreal. And I think their depth too. Like I said, we've all said it's like their depth, I think, offensively is a lot more than the Kings. Kings have depth too. It's just, do they have as much high-powered guys that can do it in the system that they have? I think that's what it is. But we'll see who wins this series, and that gets started later tonight. So, yeah, it should be fun. Hopefully it's fun. The Kings don't just...
I think it'll be fun.
I think it'll be good. But thanks, Jacob Squared, for coming on the show and talking Oilers and Kings for this last round 1 matchup. And make sure to check out all of our stuff at thehockeywriters.com. We've got great recap, takeaways, articles, bunch of stuff on the playoff coverage. We have a round 1 hub that has everything in one place. So check that out. And also check out our Twitter account. We've got our X account as we're doing a lot of live tweeting throughout the playoffs with highlights and a whole bunch of fun things. So check that out. And but until our next video, we'll see you next time.